Courses are transformational products. You start here, you get here, you have facilitated some type of change. There was kind of this online education boom. People had time, people were interested in developing new skills. You saw a huge influx of creators starting to launch digital products in general and courses specifically. Audience size being larger is more beneficial. You have more people to sell to. But there are people who have built tremendously successful course or educational businesses without what we would consider massive audiences, design or development or marketing, and you end up building a business around that. But it takes you away from the work that you like doing. They get to the point where, okay, in order to scale this and build a sustainable business, they either need to stop doing the thing that they like doing, or they need to learn the skills required to build a team, to have a team operate the parts of the businesses that they don't want to. I think there used to be this perception that like launch a course, throw it up there and it'll generate $5,000 a month for you. It is much more nuanced than that. There are some people who courses will never be a fit for.
This is Miles Sellyn, VP of Partnerships at Course Studio, a design and development agency focused on supporting content creators and building amazing experiences for their audiences. They have worked with leading creators like Colin and Samir, Miss Excel, Ryan Serhant, and funded YouTuber guest Hannah Williams from Paid Transparency Street to launch incredible digital products and courses that have become an integral part of their income streams. Today's episode is going to be focused on deep diving specifically into the world of courses. Digital courses have been a popular income tool for creators over the past decade, but as we head into the next era of the creator economy, what role do courses play? In this episode, we dive into the history of courses before and after COVID, how courses function as part of a creator's income journey, why you should not create courses, and what you need to do if you are still considering being a course creator. This conversation is really eye-opening about the state of courses and will have you looking at your audience to ask, are you sure you want this? The Funded YouTuber is brought to you by Gigastar. All right, let's talk about courses, Miles. I think that this is going to be such an interesting conversation because when you came to me and were like, why creators should not use courses, I was like, tell me everything. And so this is going to be such a deep dive into all of this stuff. I think we're going to be able to answer a lot of questions and debunk a lot of things and give people like a really appropriate roadmap to like be successful on their financial creator journey, especially as we head into like this new upcoming year. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. Excited to talk about this stuff. A quick background on me and our business. So my name's Miles. I'm the VP of partnerships at Course Studio. So I oversee all of our platform partnerships. So with businesses like Kajabi and Thinkific and Teachable and kind of platforms in the space, I oversee those relationships. And then I also do all of our business development, sales and marketing. And I'm super involved in the initial stages of client strategy. So when a creator comes to us and says, I want to do a thing, I'm really involved in helping them figure out what that thing should be and whether or not we'd be a good fit for it. Been working in the creator economy for about 2 years, but prior to that, I worked in digital marketing and web design and kind of building these products outside of the creator space for better part of 10 years.
So when we talk about courses, I feel like it's always been like one of like the easiest, slowest hanging fruit for content creators to be able to create their first digital product. I would love to kind of go through like a history 101 of like courses, like how they came about, like why they're relevant, and like how the creator economy had really latched on to them. And then of course, like we'll talk later steps of like, okay, like where are they now and like what's happened to them so that we can have a good timeline of what's going on. So I give you the floor, Professor Miles, on like our history lesson here.
Absolutely. So I mean, this modality of learning has really existed for kind of like 10 years, I would say. Sort of like 2012-ish is when online education started to become a lot more popular. That's when you saw platforms like Coursera and Udemy really start to pick up. But oftentimes it was in either the professional context, so like organizations bringing on courses to start to train their employees, so kind of professional development standpoint. And then higher education was a little bit early on this. Basically for universities to be offering, one-off courses and things like that. So that industry has existed for, a decent amount of time. It didn't really, at least in my experience and from my vantage, start to manifest in the creator economy in a material way until the pandemic. Everyone was online. There was kind of this online education boom. People had time. People were interested in developing new skills. And so you saw a huge influx of creators starting to launch digital products in general and courses specifically. And yeah, we can maybe get into kind of how that has looked since then. But certainly I would say like 2020, 2021 is when we saw these popping up in a major way.
since I've been a YouTuber since before the pandemic, I really and I obviously do a ton of creator education since then. I really define the creator economy as like BC before COVID and like AC after
Yeah,
COVID
sure.
because there's such different ways that we did stuff. How someone built a successful brand as a YouTuber before COVID looks entirely different from how they have built success after COVID. Like how the audience functions, how the content is created, how the businesses are built, like everything about it is so different. Like, and I would even argue that we'll probably never see like a mega successful YouTuber again in the same way. Like, I feel like that's like was like a fad that we had like almost like boy bands kind of thing. Like they came, they conquered, and then like while they still are maintaining and have some level of priority in like our YouTuber space, I think that we'll never get like that massive following on YouTube again. So so let's talk about like how beneficial were courses to YouTubers before COVID? Like what's it like? What is it like? What's it, if there's data around like, how was it a part of like the income streams for creators at that time?
I wouldn't say it was significant. It was mostly, I would say, online educators or coaches, people who had these kind of like analog businesses that were starting to deploy them online. So people who were, business coaches, sales coaching, things like that. People had started to explore putting that content online. But those people were almost backing into being content creators. They were coaches and educators and kind of trainers first. And I think that pre-COVID, there were a few, I would say, kind of outliers of people who had successfully launched courses or digital products. I think Ali Abdal launched his kind of just prior to COVID. And so there was a little bit of success in the space, but I think that most creators at that point hadn't really started to explore monetizing outside of those, the more traditional channels, whether that be kind of just AdSense or brand partnerships. And so, if you were to look at kind of the graph of total revenue generated by digital products, it's like by creators and then COVID, there's, a massive spike. That 2 years, there would have been a peak, I would say. Or I should say the individual products launched during that period had massively successful economic outcomes. And now we've sort of pulled back down to, I think, a bit more of a sustainable, revenue pie, where there's lots of people who are potentially able to do this, but you're not getting these crazy outcomes where people are having $10 million launches over 6-month spans and things like that, because the market just doesn't really sustain that at this point.
I couldn't agree more because I remember in the early YouTuber space, like in 2017, which is when I like really embraced the YouTube space, it was a lot of like, YouTube is a part of what you're doing. Like, yes, there's brand partnerships. Yes, it's a lot like affiliates are really big. Yes, you'd have course digital products. Like in order to be successful as a YouTuber, you had to have all of these income streams in order to be financially stable. Not, and there's something said for being financially lucrative, but financially stable is, I think, more what a lot of people are looking for. Like when we were learning from creators like, Amy Landino or Roberto Blake, Nick Nimmin, where they were very course focused, but they had affiliates, all these other things attached to it. It just made so much sense, and that became like the model. And I think that if it hadn't have been for that time, the growth and the opportunity that happened from COVID, I don't think would have existed. Like there was so much groundwork and experimenting and like solution finding that happened before that allowed for creators to like this creator 2.0 that happened in the creator economy to be like formed in this like post-COVID space.
Absolutely agree. And who you mentioned there are all great examples of a particular moment in time as well, right? Because the educational products that they provide were very focused on how to build a creator business, how to become a creator, how to be good at being a creator. And at that moment in time, there were so many people who were like, oh, I want to explore this. And so I think there were outsized economic incomes or outcomes at that moment because there were a lot of people interested in that type of thing. But that is, one of the real traps I think that creators fall into nowadays with thinking about courses, particularly YouTubers, is that every YouTuber who has reached a certain level of success, in theory, could create a how to do YouTube course or how to do YouTube product. And oftentimes people will do that. But they make the mistake of conflating their audience with a potential customer for a product. And so if you use Roberto as an example, everyone who follows Roberto is at least tangentially interested in becoming a professional creator. And so his products are a great fit for that because it aligns really well with his content. But if you are a lifestyle creator or a vlogger to then say, I want to launch a course about being good at YouTube, your audience is not going to be interested in that, and oftentimes will resent you or take issue with that quite vocally in a lot of cases. And so I think that's, one thing that we always try to think through with creators is what is the product that actually makes sense for your audience that is not necessarily, it doesn't always have to be the thing that you are most qualified to teach as much as the thing that your audience wants from you.
I would love to dive into that. That's a really powerful statement. It's like there's a big difference between what you can teach and what you can sell. Right. And I think there's this classic term like those that can do teach. I think that this is totally different. It's like those that build an audience need to figure out what that audience will buy. And I think that you've hit such an interesting point where, and this is something I preach constantly, and I have for years, and you know this about me, there's more than one way for a YouTuber or creator to be successful. And while we can learn from each other and like, oh, cool, that's a thing that you did, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Like for me, as someone who offers service-based and teach people about like online marketing and stuff, there's not a course for that. Like it's not a course, like that's like a college degree. Like this is 15 years of experience in my brain. Like I can't just like do a course and make us the money and people will offer them like take it and do it and implement it. What I am selling to people is micro doses of information that they can implement or be overwhelmed by and then hire me. Like that's what I'm able to sell to them. So doing courses and digital products has always been a really big miss for me because of who my target audience is. The same person who does online marketing or social media marketing, but for like maybe talking just specifically to people who are doing travel content creation or building a specific kind of business, those people can sell a course because it's a specific thing for a specific audience that solves a specific objective. And they probably also don't have a budget in place to have someone do it for them. So it's really, I love what you said about like course or something that people can sell someone versus can buy. How do you guys also put that in place for when it comes to courses with what you guys do with your service and also what you've seen creators do?
You mentioned that courses kind of have objectives to them, and that is a great way to think about it. Courses are transformational products, right? It should be you start here, you get here. By the end of that kind of linear experience, you have facilitated some type of change. And if you can't do that, then the course framework or kind of modality of learning is not really effective. And so, sometimes people will go way, way too niche where it's, this specific type of skill is a course where the audience for that is just too small to be a reasonable business. Or people will go way, way too broad and say, I'm going to teach you everything about digital marketing, where it's, who is that necessarily serving? And so if there is a case where so I'll give you a couple examples of courses that I think are, finite and specific and do a great job of this. We work with a creator named Miss Excel, who kind of blew up on TikTok during the pandemic, and she teaches Excel and larger than that, a kind of product suite and courses based off Microsoft Office. And she has, her differentiation is, she teaches this in a very unique way. It's fun, it's engaging in what is a traditionally very dry subject. And you can start a course here, need to learn 100 things about Excel, and by the end, those 100 things about Excel. So there's a very kind of specific pain point that a course addresses, and it takes that person through that kind of transformation. Also, it's just thousands upon thousands of people who use Excel. So there's a big target market and a huge overlap with her audience. Anyone who follows her is interested in Excel tips, is a good fit for the course. Colin and Samir's course is another great example. People who follow Colin and Samir are interested in the business of being a creator. Their course teaches, how to become better at securing brand deals and to position yourself to build a sustainable brand deal business. So there's a big overlap between what they do on their channel and their content and the product for the course.
What I think is important that you've pointed out, though, between those two creator examples is they also had fairly sizable audiences. What part does audience size play into having a successful course rather not just like a launch, but like long-term sustainability?
Obviously, the audience size being larger is more beneficial. You have more people to sell to in theory, but there are people who have built tremendously successful, whether course or educational businesses or digital product businesses, without what we would consider massive audiences. There's a creator named Dominique Broadway who sells financial education, particularly focused on teaching women entrepreneurs. I believe her audience is sort of sub 200,000 combined, but she's built 7-8 figure business on the back of that, doing financial education. You love to see it. And so again, to us, it's always about what is that overlap of audience versus potential customer. Is everyone who follows her is a potential customer for her product. And so, to use an example, like some of these mega creators, like Mr. Beast, is always hard to kind of think through what a digital product would be because his audience is so broad, so diverse. Just by sheer scale, he could probably launch something and there would be enough people there for there to be a compelling business. But there's almost an overwhelm of options there and a lack of clarity around like where is the sub niche within that in which to position a product.
It's interesting. I never thought that your audience would be too big to sell to.
Yeah. Or I think the challenge there becomes your audience is so big that it's hard to, you could build anything. ViewStats is a great example. Like he built this product, which because of his scale, he could throw it out there and there's so many YouTubers who follow him. There's an audience for that, but he could also, make a workout app. And I'm sure there's 100,000 people who would want to buy his workout app. And so it's kind of where do you want to focus your time and attention? And then what is the impact of that across the rest of your business, which is always something we think about, particularly with YouTubers, because YouTubing is so time intensive and it is really like such a drain on, not a drain, it's such a focus of people's creative energy that you have to create a product that doesn't take you away from content creation, which is, I think, why most people get into this in the first place.
Why do you think, or do you think that YouTubers have a hard time building scalable businesses?
I think that YouTube is the most demanding platform. And so I think that to do it well and to do it in a way that allows you to build a sustainable business just requires a lot of mental energy and physical effort. Unlike a lot of the other platforms, the lift that goes into creating great long form content, it just is hard. Like pre-production, production, post-production, ideation. So many of the YouTubers that I know as well are such sticklers and justifiably so for the quality of the content, whether or not they think of themselves like that, they're filmmakers in a lot of ways. And so it is hard to do anything else to the same level of fidelity or quality that you would build your YouTube channel, because unless you have a larger team or working with an external partner, you don't have the time and energy.
It's so interesting listening to you say that because I agree, but I also can pull back and you can say all of that same stuff about like a lawyer or like a local business owner, or like we as individuals tend to develop a particular set of skills that allow us to generally like fund our life or bring joy to our life. Like it's a thing that we can do. And creators have found a way to find creativity as a way to make income, which is so awesome because it's really nice to not have to worry about the joke of like, what's the difference between a pizza and an artist? And it's like a pizza can feed a family of 4, right? That whole terrible joke. I know that I heard that all the time when I went to art school. And so it's such a great place to be in. But I really wish that there was a way for YouTubers to understand, like, if you want to have longevity, you have to be able to build a sustainable business. And I really think that the future of where we're going to go in the creator economy and how sustainability will work is going to be like, yes, you might be building something off of your face and your name, but you have to be building something in tangent with it that isn't dependent on that as well.
One of the unique things I found in working with creators is that if you ask someone who owns their own business, they would say, I'm an entrepreneur. If you ask a creator, they would say, I'm a creator. And I think that what draws people to the profession is not necessarily the idea of running their own business as much as it is pursuing this creative pursuit and this creative passion. I actually for a long time, I did kind of coaching and strategy work with people who ran creative agencies. And I would see a similar thing. You become really good at design or development or marketing, and you end up building a business around that. But it takes you away from the work that you like doing. And it's very hard to scale that part of it. And I see that a lot with creators as well, right? They get to the point where, okay, in order to scale this and build a sustainable business, they either need to stop doing the thing that they like doing, or they need to learn the skills required to build a team, to have a team operate the parts of the businesses that they don't want to. And I think that is, in the creator economy, I've found that quite hard for people to find, like even simple kind of like business planning, business frameworks, how to sort of set up a business so that you are not the person who needs to do absolutely everything in it, is something that I've found most creators don't necessarily have that knowledge or skill set at this point.
I always say to people, like, you're not a creator, you're a business owner who uses the creator economy as part of your system. And I think that if creators can really have that fundamental mind shift, they'll be able to learn differently what they can do to be successful. I think having teams is vital. Any successful business owner wants to get to a team. Anyone. And if you think about, most business owners already have a team, like they have like an accountant or like a CP that does their taxes, or they have a lawyer that handles like their legal paperwork and stuff, or though like a VA. Like there are still those small teams that they put into place, and the more they can offload the labor of business, the more they can focus on what they do best, which is the product that they're selling.
Yeah, and I think it is, in more traditional sort of business spheres, you often hear the term working on the business versus working in the business. And I think a lot of creators love working in the business and don't spend enough time working on the business. But the work that a creator, in my opinion, should be doing is working on the business, setting that part of it up so that they can work in the business, because that's the part that they find fulfillment in. And that's not true universally. People find fulfillment different ways in terms of what you want to do every day. But being deliberate and intentional about how you structure that side of things is something that I don't think creators do enough. And so I think as this industry kind of continues to evolve and mature, and people start to think about their businesses that way as businesses, it'll lead to people being less burnt out and just being happier with the businesses that they're building for themselves.
100%. Okay. So to bring us back a little bit to like our course before COVID, after COVID, sort of analogy of things. We, as you had said, we hit this like peak of course education and learning in 2021. I think that was the year that the creator economy kind of term and concept was truly formed and like became like how we defined ourselves. We weren't just YouTubers or TikToker. If you were now like, I'm a creator economy personnel, essentially. And then I think that we had this shift around courses where I feel like, and this is my perspective, and you can again correct me or agree with me or whatever, we go from there. I feel like there became this oversaturation of it. And it became a way that people realized, like, I don't like to learn this way. Like, I know for me personally, I had bought so many courses I never went through. Like, I never did the work of that course. And so it's like, I had to like put a rule in place for myself. Like, you're not buying any more courses because you never do them. So talk to me about the shift from this like peak course time coming out of it and where we are now.
Inherently as part of a course, there is a time commitment involved in that. And I think that many people aren't willing to make that if there is not a clear return on investment of their time. And so that's something we always want to think about with creators and courses as well, is this going to be a thing that your audience is excited about, that will provide value to them and that they can commit to? We've worked with creators that have created like 20-hour courses. It's like, that's great that it has all that knowledge in it, but is there a way that this can be packaged to be more consumable and really have the outcome that you're looking for the student? One way to do that is cohort based, so that you take people in, you say, hey, this is a group of 40 people, we're going to go through the learning. That has a lot of benefits in terms of you can typically charge higher price points for it. It holds people accountable. You're typically getting better outcomes. Problem is that it's a larger time commitment for the creator. And so a lot of people, based off what is going on with the rest of their business, aren't able to commit to that. Oftentimes we will advocate for doing that first, run 2 or 3 cohorts, figure out what works and what's valuable, and then be able to turn that into a sort of more self-directed, self-paced course. I do strongly think there will always be a space for that, depending on what the product is. But increasingly where we're seeing creators move and the types of products that are being able to deliver more value to their audience are either things like memberships or communities where there is a kind of ongoing relationship, rather than this sort of like finite start and stop to it. Even what you'd mentioned in terms of being able to do consulting or coaching for people, there is a world with a service offering like that where you're doing 1 to 50 coaching and it's a monthly experience, and you can build a kind of subscription model around that. And so that's something that we're seeing a lot of creators do. It gets to be a little bit more personal. It allows you to not have to do all this upfront work around creating, a 5-hour course or something like that, and starts to be able to build this kind of community with your audience in a more, in a sort of closer way, which is, I think, really where we're starting to see stuff go, is more these sort of niche communities and people really feeling connected to a creator, and also helping to move people off platform, obviously.
I am a creator. I'm a YouTuber, and I am considering courses as part of my income stream. What does that look like? Like now, heading into 2025, what is the state of the course creator economy, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. So if you were looking to start a course right now, the first thing I would do would be start talking to your audience. Rather than being like, hey, rather than saying, hey, I have made this thing, do you want it? Be browsing through your comments. What are the things that people are asking from you? We're a big advocate for just doing surveying right off the bat, saying, hey, I'm thinking about creating a thing. Are you interested in this, or this? And people are like, sometimes you get really surprising answers. We worked with a relatively large creator who we thought the product was a community product. People were like, nope, I don't want that at all. I want this other thing. And so getting that feedback is really useful, because then you can make sure that you're pursuing the right type of opportunity based on what your audience is interested in. And then once you have a thesis for it, we usually try to distill that down to be like, okay, this is what I've heard. You can bring your community and your audience into the process to say, this is what I've heard. I'm going to go do this thing. Are you interested in this once I make it? And you can start to build kind of interest around it. And then you've got a pretty good idea of what the potential uptake is going to be on it. And then you can gate your investment based off of that. So if you think, hey, there's been enough interest here that I think this is a $200 thing, I can make $100,000 for it. It makes sense to spend $30,000 or $40,000 to build it. But if you haven't gotten that interest, don't do it. And I think you maybe know Sarah Renee Clark. I always forget them. She did this like executionally in the best way possible in my mind, and has built like an incredibly successful business that is a mix of digital and physical products. But she just started small to say, okay, here's a thing that I know people are potentially interested in. It was lightweight for her to make. It was low ticket, low cost. She could kind of float that out there with minimal chance of blowback. And once she started to get interest in that, she was able to build this kind of product suite that takes you from low ticket to higher ticket offers. And she did it in a way where she was really respecting what her audience was interested in and wanted. Like her audience was asking for these things, which is the right way to do it, rather than sort of making something and be like, hey, I think you might want this. People will tell you if they want something.
I think that's a really important thing. And I think what I find most interesting about what you talked about is, and using Sarah as an example, who's been a guest on the podcast, is it's patience. The thing I think that people forget when it comes to creator economy work and building an audience that buys from you is it takes time. And I think that people are so impatient because they're probably trying to use becoming a YouTuber in the creator economy as a way to get out of their current situation, and they're needing or wanting income now and fast. And this is where I think service comes in, and that can be like the immediate thing. Like, what can I sell now and do right now that can make me money? And then what can I keep building that can have longevity and do these things? Do you think courses has a place for creators to be like something that can create essentially a salary for them on a regular basis, like a monthly, like, 4 or 5K, if not more a month on a regular basis? Or do they have to keep doing something different to keep hitting that? Like, they have to keep creating or doing, like, because I know what it was before and I realize like how it's working now.
The not very helpful answer is it depends. And so, courses specifically can manifest in all different types of ways. So, Miss Excel, I mentioned before, that's kind of an evergreen product, right? There is always people who will want training around Excel. And so that is a business that can be really sustainable because there's constantly demand for it. For something where you are potentially generating demand as well as servicing that demand, it can be a bit more involved and requires more maintenance. So you hear the term launching a lot, where it's like people will go through these launch cycles where they'll launch a product or relaunch a product every quarter or something like that. And so you can build a model like that. The challenge with it is it becomes like quite spiky from a revenue standpoint. And so it really depends on like what the thing is, what your market is. And, I think there used to be this perception that like launch a course, throw it up there and it'll generate $5,000 a month for you. It is a much more, like every other type of business, it is much more nuanced than that. And there are some people who courses will never be a fit for. I've been talking to some like DIY creators lately, and in theory, there's a world where you could make a course, but what they've had a lot of success with is just making plans. So it's like, hey, I did this thing on my channel. Do you want the plan for it? It's $9. It's a digital download. And that's never going to be their whole business, but it's a nice little piece of like supplementary income. And so I would really encourage creators not to look at what other people have done and really sort of position themselves as, hey, this is the thing I should go do because I saw creator X, Y, or Z do it. Really focus in on kind of what your business looks like, where you think you need to create additional value, where you think you can create additional value for your audience, how much money you're trying to make. If you're trying to make an extra $20,000 a year from this, then that really changes it if you're trying to make $200,000. And so your effort and the risk you are taking on should be commensurate with what the financial outcome you want is.
I think that's an incredibly powerful way for us to wrap up our podcast today, because I think that it gives a really appropriate action plan, which is don't try and look at, we've walked us through the journey. We've talked about the history of courses. To wrap us up and finally, what do you see courses, like where do you see courses going for creators in the future? And what can we take away and go do if courses are right for us?
I think courses will continue to have a place. I think increasingly creators will be building more and more other types of digital products. I think we'll see people building these communities. I think we'll see people building, sort of PDF-based businesses. I think we'll see people building SaaS products more and more. People actually being the head of software companies and building kind of niche software companies. In terms of courses specifically, if someone is like, hey, I think this is an opportunity for me, I want to go pursue it right now, main takeaway would be go talk to your audience, get a sense of start them here, get them to here. What does that journey look like? What is the transformation that you could provide that would be valuable for people? Go double check it, model out some revenue scenarios based off the interest you're getting, and then figure out whether or not you want to invest in it.
I love it. Miles, where can people connect with you and follow your journey and learn more from you?
So if you want to follow me, LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. You can find me on there. And then Core Studio as well. We're always posting stuff. LinkedIn and Instagram are the best two places to follow us there.
Perfect. We'll have the links for that over at our show notes at thefundedYouTuber.com. Miles, thank you so much for this really insightful deep dive into courses and how it works for our YouTuber journeys. It is super impactful. Thank you again so much. And remember, guys, until next week, go make that money. Peace. The Funded YouTuber is brought to you by Gigastar, a parent company of Gigastar Market, an SEC-registered funding portal and member of FINRA. Learn more at gigastar.io. Neither Gigastar nor its affiliated companies provide legal, regulatory, financial, or tax advice. Any opinions expressed herein are those of the authors and are the informational purposes only. The information and opinions expressed herein are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investments, objectives, financial situation, or needs of any specific investors.